Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Kescast. This week I'm joined by
Caitlin
in
year 13,
and we're going to be talking about some poetry that you've written, I understand. So do you want to just tell everyone a bit more about, the themes and the sort of general, a brief overview of the poetry?
Yeah, so I wrote them for a website that I created for stigmas behind mental health. Because I found that quite a few people, especially in, I'd say, middle school, don't really understand that stereotypes can be quite damaging with mental health especially.
Yeah.
And also sort of the sides of mental health that people don't really think of. So people think of depression or anxiety. They don't think of OCD or schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder or anything like that. So it's sort of bringing light to the reality behind mental health and different perspectives. I think initially the inspiration for it came from the fact that there were quite a couple of people in particular who surprised me with issues with mental health and came to me and talked to me about it. And it wasn't people I'd expected in a million years to be struggling.
Okay.
So, it was sort of like an eye-opener in that sense for that.
So, right, there are a few poems here. Hopefully they'll be up on the screen. If not, then you'll have
check
to
my website.
Yeah, check the website. Actually, what is the name of the website?
It's called Relating Experiences, but
okay.
Because I don't have money, I haven't paid for a specific domain.
Okay.
So it's just, it'll be on the bulletin, I think. Miss Biggs said she put it up. So.
Cool. So, what kind of... Yeah, as I said, we've got 5 poems here.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll be on the screen as and when. What kind of devices were you looking to include? Like, what kind of stories are you trying to tell with these poems?
Different people's stories. So I've used a lot of repetition throughout all of the poetry. I guess the idea is just to re-emphasise the point with repetition. But and then similes as well and metaphors. I find them very interesting to come up with, just because I feel like when you're going through something that I guess the world doesn't understand, it's kind of as if it doesn't even make sense. So if you use a simile that is sort of ambiguous, then that's how it's feeling, if that makes sense.
Okay. It's
feeling quite ambiguous to the world because they think it's black and white, like everybody feels like this, everybody feels like that. So I guess that's what I wanted to portray. And the feeling of people, so there was a girl who I was talking to and she was saying that she was being accused of lying about her depression. Because she'd laugh in class or, she'd be smiling.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's kind of like trying to remove the expectation that you have to be showing a certain sign.
Okay.
Or fitting a certain image, if that makes sense.
In order to have that disorder. Okay. So... Well, obviously we just talked about, getting people to sort of come away from the stigmas of these mental health issues.
Yeah.
But what would you say would be, perhaps the main thing that you want people to take away from reading these poems? Like the core sort of thrust behind them?
That
and the website.
Everybody sort of experiences things different, and that's okay.
Okay.
And there shouldn't be a definition to how depression is experienced, anxiety is experienced, etc. And that if you're feeling like depressed or whatever you're feeling, that is real. That's not that's real to you. That might not be the same as how your friend's experiencing it or somebody on the internet is experiencing it, but it's still real because it's real to you.
Okay.
So I guess that's the overriding message, that it's okay and you can talk about it and try and take away from the, I guess, stigma behind the words mental health themselves. Because when somebody says mental health, everyone sort of sighs and it's like, oh, we're talking about this again.
Well, we know what's coming here.
Exactly. Everyone's like, oh, switch off. So I'd like for that to sort of change, and at least in the next 10 years at most. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I think what we should do, so of the 5 poems here, which one would you say would be the one that you'd want to, like talk about on this podcast the most?
Probably Forgotten.
Forgotten?
Yeah.
Okay. So, right, we have a copy here. Should we do a quick reading of just this one, and then we can talk a little bit more in depth about it?
Yeah.
So,
do you want to read it?
Yeah, go on then. The artist.
So, Forgotten. Like a piece of paper drifting through the wind, as if it meant nothing, but it did, once. That sheet held a world in 4 corners, 2 or 3 now, gone, torn, wasted, everything forgotten. The feeling when the light just stopped, dead, gone. You never know what you have until you never know. Light and happiness are not the same thing, but darkness and loneliness hold hands, they choke you. Forgotten. That lake becomes a watercolour corroding in the rain, a memory that means nothing, nothing, nothing. Pinks, blues, yellows, grey, not even sunset, but it may as well have been. It doesn't matter, yet it matters. Forgotten. How to breathe, waiting for the symphony of, hey, how you doing? Are you all right? Gold dust that never comes. Hopelessly, naively, stupidly, waiting. I'm still waiting. Putting plasters on paper cuts to only take them off the next day to a jagged scar. Forgotten. How alone it felt to not be alone. Could tell the truth of the great escape, but forgotten when ... is typing. Forgotten tyranny, forgotten complications, forgotten forgot. There are so many things worse than pain. Forgotten feeling, numbness, the broken existence of anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose you could say this about all poetry, but I think with these poems in particular, would you say that there's definitely an aspect behind it that's meant to be sort of spoken and shouted out and not just read on a paper?
I think it would. I think it would be. It's better read out because you can. When you're reading a poem, you may not fully take it in, but when somebody's reading it to you, you can interpret that how you want to interpret it. And in my opinion, really, I guess school is very important, but the whole analysis of poetry kind of ruins the whole point of it, is just to be understood in your own way. Okay. So reading it, I would probably say that's quite important to...
Probably the most important way of understanding the
poem.
Or, I mean, these
or
poems...
interpret it as you want to interpret it, but, you know...
Okay. So, what kind of perspective would you say that this poem particularly... I know you just said, analysing the poem.
No,
It's not, I mean...
No, analysing it is fine, it's analysing it from your own perspective. I just think in A-levels or GCSEs, you've got a certain perspective you're supposed to talk about, so... That's the problem.
Okay, I catch your drift.
You know what I mean? Like, you can analyse it on your own. Okay. Without having everybody think the same thing.
Okay. So, in a way, whatever analysis we may talk about now, if that's a good idea, it's not
a set
It's not concrete. Yeah. So, it's definitely the type
it's
of
just
poetry...
my perspective or your perspective.
Yeah, the type of poetry that you want to bring and... take home and read for yourself.
Yeah.
So, right, do you have any points about, any literary devices that you may want to talk about?
I guess I've used lots of lists in this one. I think this was the 3rd poem I've ever written. And I've used lists. I used lists in all 3 of the first 3. And I guess it's just the idea of sort of not everything fits. How do I describe it? It's like in your mind, not everything fits together. It's not all one coherent situation. You're just sort of
like
listing whatever comes.
Going from one to the other.
Yeah, so that was just trying to capture that.
Okay.
And then the speech.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's just it's something everybody experiences, I guess, as a teenager these days, on social media and whatever, is the importance that one conversation can have. Yeah. So whether that be a conversation with your friend or a conversation with a partner or, whoever sort of thing. So it's just sort of the relatability, if that's a word.
Would you say...
To that? Don't know.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of, trying to incorporate some kind of social media aspect into the poetry, because obviously social media plays a huge part in mental health nowadays, whether good or bad. Yeah. And I think it's important as a sign of awareness of the times that we are in, these very technologically advanced times, to include something like that in the poetry that you're writing. Yeah,
and I guess my favourite line from any of my poetry really is in this one, which is the putting plasters on paper cuts to only take them off the next day to a jagged scar.
Interesting.
And
okay.
I guess
tell us about that then.
The idea behind it was that you're always trying to fix problems by just covering them up. Mm-hmm. So you suppress your feelings or you pretend you're fine, and then one day it all sort of comes back because you've never dealt with it correctly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is a stereotype, isn't it? Particularly of some aspects of, I guess, like stereotypical toxic masculinity. Yeah. Obviously, these poems apply to everyone. It's not just a masculine perspective, but in the sense where there is a stereotype of men going and suppressing their feelings and not really being able to deal with anything emotionally because they just don't know how.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that I feel like a lot of people don't know how to express how they're feeling, and just feel like they're burdening people, or because I went through a stage of that, feeling like I'm burdening people,
of course.
And I think everyone does. And the point of that line was just to sort of show that you're never going to heal or fix it if you don't talk about it. You're just covering it up and ignoring it. Okay. So, yeah.
So would you say that poetry, maybe for you in particular, maybe not, would you say this is a good coping mechanism for anyone out there who may be suffering with similar mental health issues?
I think poetry, I write song lyrics and I found them therapeutic. Okay. But it's very difficult to write, to do two things at once, if you know what I mean. So if you're doing, for me, in my opinion, when I was writing song lyrics, it becomes you have to come up with a melody, you have to come up with,
all of that.
All of it. It's
all
just way too
trappings of a song.
It's way too sort of forced, and it's like it's like trapped in one sort of place. Yeah. Whereas poetry doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to. There's no convention, and you don't even have to share it if you don't want to. Like I've chosen to share mine, but these aren't all about me either. So a lot of these are other people's perspectives.
It's a very. I think particularly with this collection of poems, is it meant? I was going to ask as well. Is it meant to be read as a collection? Obviously, we've got different perspectives. Yeah. But does it all sort of come together for a final message?
No, I guess the overriding message is just everyone has different perspectives. Okay. They don't all follow each other. Yeah. But you could read them as a collection. You could read them on their own. They still make sense. Okay. I guess it's just all different perspectives. Because I wrote all of these in quite quick succession, except from this one. This one, I forgot about this one, and it was just folded somewhere in my room, and I picked it up later. But so for example, my sister's written one, and she's given it to me to put on the website. So they don't all have to follow a pattern.
I suppose anyone listening really who feels in a similar sort of dark place about their mental health particularly, they could in turn write a poem if they wanted to, if it was some kind of escape, and then put that on the website.
Or it doesn't even have to be a poem. It could be a story. It could be.
Oh, so it's a
it
place
could be anything.
for more than just poetry.
Yeah, it could be anything. Mine is poetry because I feel like I'm quite good at expressing stuff in that form.
Okay.
But it can be a video file of music, or it could be, anything, any art form you wanted to express however you wanted to express it. I just found poetry particularly interesting, so that's how I did it.
So I think I'm going to wrap it up fairly soon, looking at the time. If you could say something for the world to hear relating to mental health, or for people struggling with their mental health to hear, relating to any experience or the poetry, for example, or the website, what would you want them to hear?
Big or small, problems are problems. You don't have to, don't let anybody sort of tell you, oh, that's not a big deal, or just, there's people who have it worse than you. I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
Because it's like...
It's so belittling.
In what way, sort of thing. You can't relate somebody's worst. So if you're feeling at your worst, that is your worst, and it's all relative to somebody else's worst. So your worst is going to feel the same as somebody else's worst in a different situation. So you can't say, that sort of thing. So if you're feeling anything, whether you think it's big or small, just sort of talk to people, and don't stick with people who tell you that you're a burden. Don't stick with people who make you feel like you're a burden. There's no point. So that's
because I guess the whole point is, in this sense, communication. Yeah, which can be done.
It's a feeling of neglect, I guess. The whole thing is that I've felt neglected in my life. Other people have felt neglected in their life, and you don't need that. Yeah. So it's a way of talking about things so that you don't feel like that. You feel like you've got a community, I guess. So yeah. Cool.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
No problem.
And unsure as to what's going to be happening in terms of the podcast relating to coronavirus, obviously the big C word.
Big old COVID-19.
That big C word. So I suppose, we'll bring them out when we can. But yeah, I think this might be the last one for a while. So take care, stay safe, and thank you for listening.